She's trained in the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies and Polaris Insight Center for Ketamine-Assisted Therapy. Let's take a trip together and hear about psilocybin mushrooms in Oregon. Please give a very, very warm welcome to Gina Gratza.
Well, thank you all for being here. This is very exciting. It's a little larger of a stage than I had yesterday, so this is nice. If you were at yesterday's conversation, nothing here is new. It's the same act, so no surprises. So before we begin, I just want to say thank you to Oregon Country Fair for inviting me to speak today. Thank you to my Channel Now ladies that you'll see spread throughout the audience. They have their mushroom hats on. And what we're gonna do is, if throughout the talk a question comes, just raise your hand and one of the ladies will come and find you. And you can write the question on a piece of paper and they'll collect it at the end and then read it up here. They're Channel Now and they're reporting live in the moment. So it feels only appropriate to have them ask the questions. Thank you, ladies. Thank you to this beautiful day of sunshine. Thank you to the elements and the earth. Thank you to the land that holds us. And thank you to plant medicines that bring us here today, gathered and curious. My name is Gina Gratza, licensed marriage and family therapist, working in the above ground field of psychedelic assisted therapy and trauma. Gotta get situated. I am a fellow trip traveler, a lifelong student, a cosmic traveler of the mind, and I love swimming in the subconscious, making conscious what previously wasn't. Rather than bore you with my credentials and trainings, which I'm comfortable sharing but can drone on, I will say that psychedelics have been impacting my life since I was 20 years old when I went to my first party, which was Burning Man. And the next 8 years just continued to have a tremendous impact on who I am today as a woman and my experience in the field of psychedelics. I'll actually be getting married there next month. So yay, Burning Man. Husband. I also want to note that I'm a novice to this work, meaning that even though I've trained in various capacities and modalities, the field of psychedelics and exploring plant medicine is a lifelong process, and I'm young in it, and I look forward to the many decades that will come with more experiences, and I am forever in the process of learning. I'm grateful to my experiences that I've had, and I welcome future teachings. I'm speaking to you today as a cis white female, trained in Western academia, and the lens that I'm speaking to you today is from that perspective. So know that there are many other perspectives on this subject. I open myself to a more empathic and anthropologic framework, and I'm not closed off to alternative resources of valuable and meaningful information. So like I said, I'll be calling out on the Channel Now ladies, but also what they're gonna do is they're gonna deliver mushroom fun facts throughout this talk, so it's not just me droning on. So we'll be tossing those out throughout the talk today. So before we get started, I'm just curious what you all think about psilocybin. So what do you think about psilocybin? What brings you here today? You can just raise your hand and shout it out. Yeah.
I've just been in my third year growing, and I think it's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, growing and thinks it's the coolest thing ever. Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah.
I think most of the structures and fences are built on people.
He said most of the structures in the world were built by people high on mushrooms.
This fair is just about
Yes, this fair is all about mushrooms, totally. Yeah.
As a fellow licensed therapist, I'm curious about your experience with the world, sports, how that's important.
Yeah, we'll get into that. If not, we could totally talk about it, because it's weird. It's like being a clinician and stepping into the world of psychedelics. There's a lot right there. Okay, great, thank you. I'll just put that over there. All right. So here we are today, speaking about psilocybin in Oregon. There's much to say on this subject, and we're not going to cover it all in an hour, so just know it's really in-depth, this subject. And if anything piques your interest, there's always more to read. And at the end, I'll say my email address, and I will provide a bibliography to anyone who wants to know. So I'm not just like throwing out random things. So first, what is psilocybin? Psilocybin is a naturally occurring compound found in more than 200 species of fungi. Psilocybe is the most common genus. Psilocybin is biologically inactive, and in the body, it's converted into psilocin, which is the mind-altering component. Psilocybin is a tryptamine, which is a serotonin precursor, and works on the 5-HT2A receptors of the brain, and is metabolized by MAO. Let's also start by acknowledging that plant medicine, more specifically for today's conversation, psilocybin, is not new. Its healing properties have been known for over a millennia, most famously to have been used by indigenous peoples in Central and South America for religious and spiritual purposes, being referred to as the flesh of the gods. And in other countries, it's been linked to the sacred use of this plant in Serbia, Greece, and Egypt. After observing a mushroom ritual ceremony in Mexico, author and ethnomycologist R. Gordon Watson wrote about his experience in Life magazine. His article brought widespread news of the now coined term magic mushrooms in the 1950s. It also brought a lot of pain to a small town, Hualto de Jimenez, outside Oaxaca, Mexico, and a lot of pain and suffering to Maria Sabina. Maria Sabina was a medicine woman, a poet, and a shaman who endured a great deal of suffering after sharing her mushroom ceremony in confidence with Watson. Though not her intention, she introduced the ritual ceremony of mushrooms to Westerners. We have her to thank in many ways for knowing what we know now about the sacred healing medicine of psilocybin-containing mushrooms. Clap for Maria. Lucky? No, just kidding. Rachel. Mushroom fun fact. Isn't she glorious in all her color?
Yeah. Does anyone know how many mushrooms scientists have classified as edible? How many species? Species of mushrooms scientists have classified as edible. Anyone have a guess? Over 3. It's higher than 300. Lower than 6,000. 2,000. Slightly higher than 2,000. You're really close.
Every mushroom is edible.
That is the right answer. The actual answer is, you were really close, Chris. 2,189 mushrooms have been classified as edible, and you're right. Some of them will taste better than others.
Thank you, Rachel. So now into the 60s and the war on drugs. We don't have too much time to go into that, but just know that the war on drugs has never been about drugs and was used more as political power to imprison people who were against the Vietnam War and people of color. To this day, over 300,000 people are in prison for drug offenses. It is up to us to lobby to our local politicians and make a change now. And somebody told me yesterday when I was on stage that they have a nonprofit organization here in Eugene. I have a business card over there somewhere. I can't personally vouch for them, but I like that they're doing Center of Ethnobotanical Services, and they also work to lobby politicians as well as doing wonderful nonprofit work in the psychedelic community. So if you're in Eugene, just check them out. Nevertheless, the war on the drugs rhetoric put fear and hesitation into many people across the nation, and from that stopped really important research back in the 60s. So 50 years later, With great effort and dedication, the research has been approved to return, and the results are in from Johns Hopkins University, UCLA, Imperial College in London, and many more. And they are showing to have great potential for healing PTSD, depression, anxiety, smoking cessation, end-of-life distress, and many other positive effects. We're still working to re-educate the public on the truth about plant medicine and psychedelics, unthreading the lies and speaking the truth about what these experiences can be. I do want to note that psychedelics are not for everyone, and in fact should not be taken lightly without consideration. Assessments and evaluations are important to check in with one's readiness to engage in altered states of consciousness work. We often talk about set and setting. Are you in the right mindset to be engaging in altered states work? Where are you taking them? What is the setting that you're surrounded with, and by who? Our mindful awareness and attention matters when it comes to having a safe journey. And the safety of the container that you take your medicine in is going to support the opportunity for you to really surrender and dive deep into the experience. Annie, mushroom fun fact? Yeah.
All right. Do you know where you can find mushrooms in America?
Cow poop.
All 50 states, okay? And they require less water than most crops. It takes only 1.8 gallons of water to produce 1 gallon of mushrooms. That's pretty efficient compared to almonds, for example.
Are you saying mushrooms over almonds? Thank you, Annie. Okay, so now Oregon, right here, right now, this is what's happening with psilocybin. Research. Oregon started its first psychedelic research last year over at the Portland VA with the Social Neuroscience and Psychotherapy Lab under the direction of Dr. Chris Stauffer. We started treatment with 10 participants so far out of 30 for using psilocybin to treat methamphetamine use disorder within the veteran population in residential treatment. Later in the year, we are working to get MDMA for the treatment of PTSD with veterans in a group therapy study. So that's a little less researched. So much of the research that we have on psychedelics right now has been for individual folks, and we're going to be one of the first states to be doing more group work research. So yay. Okay, Shannon, come on down, yay. Mushroom fun fact with Shannon.
Hello. I thought this one was kind of special because it talks about vitamin D, and I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that redheads, which I used to be, can process vitamin D much more efficiently. I don't know if that's true. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Mushrooms produce vitamin D when exposed to ultraviolet light, but they don't need light to grow. And much like my family, who's all very pale and redheaded, mushrooms can thrive without any light.
Thank you, Shannon. So in 2020, Oregon passed Measure 109, which granted the Oregon Health Authority the ability to license and regulate the manufacturing, transportation, delivery, sale, and purchase of psilocybin products and the provision of psilocybin services, meaning that people can come into Oregon, walk into an approved service center, be assessed, not require a diagnosis, purchase and consume magic mushrooms in a service center with a trained facilitator. The sessions do have to be supervised by a trained facilitator under this law. What? This is crazy. To be the first in the nation to offer this, we have come a very long way since the so-called war on drugs. I do believe it is a human right to have access to explore consciousness. In addition to research, I work as the program coordinator and lead educator with InnerTrek, which is a psilocybin facilitator training program outside of Portland. We graduated our first group of students in March, and we're now preparing to open up a service center in the heart of Portland, located at MLK and Burnside. If you've seen that building, it's like a white building that has like a splattering of cool different paints. We're going to be on the top floor, and that should open up later in the summer. And then there's obviously more service centers spread throughout Oregon, and you can find those service centers on Oregon.gov under the Oregon Psilocybin Services. Although some folks may want to check with their local counties, because last November some counties opted out of the measure. Lucky, can you give us a mushroom fun fact?
Absolutely. All right. Who knows the difference between a button, a crimini, and a portobello mushroom?
Their age.
The age of that, right?
The age. That's correct. It's the same mushroom. The only difference is the age.
Woo, thank you. So we're not going to go too far into dosing. I just want to let you know the way in which Oregon is working on the measurements. Think 1 gram of dried mushroom is roughly 10 milligrams of psilocybin. So they're going to be weighing it in like a more condensed version in milligrams versus grams. So if you're somebody who's like, oh, I usually take 3 grams or 5 grams is the heroic dose or things like that, just know that the conversion rate is different under Oregon law. The smallest we'll be working with is 1 milligram for a microdose, and we'll go up to what people traditionally understand as 5 grams. That's including booster. So if somebody comes in and they take a certain amount, what they can only go up to, including the booster, will be 5 grams or the 50 milligrams of psilocybin.
What do you mean by booster?
Yeah, so great question. He said, what do you mean by booster? So in sessions, you'll start with an initial dose, and it's about a 30-minute onset. And then your facilitator checks in with you, see how you're doing. If you're like, yeah, I'm not really feeling it, or yeah, you know what, I think I want a little bit more, that's a booster. So then you can have as much after that, as long as you don't go over the 50 milligram mark. So that's great. And then the ways in which you can consume it are dry, whole. You can drink a tea. Some people can make them into edibles, so chocolate, and you can swallow capsules, or you can consume it as an extract. So I'm going to speak a little bit about psilocybin facilitation versus assisted therapy. You might be like, what's the difference? Great question. So psilocybin facilitation, which is what's happening in Oregon, is someone offering you support while you dive into consuming a psychedelic mushroom. It supports safe traveling and offers a container for you to explore yourself. It's not always specifically targeting healing trauma. Whereas psychedelic or psilocybin assisted therapy might be supported by a clinician. And so perhaps they have a training in that particular thing you're working with, whether it's a diagnosis or some complex trauma or PTSD. The guidance is the same. At the end of the day, we're helping people navigate the spaces by just supporting them with safety. But either way, we're trusting the medicine, and we're trusting the person's inner healing intelligence. This is something that's said a lot with many different organizations in the movement, which is like, we're just coming home to ourselves. Like at the end of the day, it's not about a therapist or a facilitator who has the answers for you. They're just there to make sure that you're safe and that it's okay for you to go into yourself, and it's yourself that ultimately has everything that you're looking for. We just are trying to clear out some fog, some cobwebs, some pain, some suffering. And so at this time, the cost of these services are higher than one might expect. Right now, some people are quoting between $2,000 and $3,500 for an assisted session. It's important to remember that's about 6 to 8 hours, and somebody's holding space with you. So a therapist's rate might be $200 an hour. When you think about how long they're with you, there's that piece of it, but also taking into consideration the cost of licensing and taxes are also quite high right now. Like, to become a facilitator, you have to pay an annual fee of $2,000 a year. And just to give you like a comparison, as a therapist, my license costs like $175 every 2 years. So significantly higher to be a psilocybin facilitator. But another beautiful option, and I think just as powerful but in different ways, is group therapy. So a lot of service centers will be offering group therapy sessions, and those can range anywhere to $300 to $600. So significantly less, and you're also having a container of other people going through their stuff, which can be healing sometimes to see someone else who maybe is going through something that you once went through, or that you didn't think about that you're also going through. So it's I feel like we heal in community beautifully, and those group sessions can be really powerful. There are also organizations that are working to bring financial support to those in need via scholarships and tiered pricing options. So what brings a person to this medicine? Why not just take a trip with your friends? I'm sure people are doing that here. Having come from the recreational drug use community, I know that many people are just going to take psychedelics with their friends and have a great time, or a challenging time. What makes the supported sessions different is the container and the set and setting. Your intention to take it mindfully with yourself and a facilitator shifts the focus of just taking it with your friends for fun outside. There's a lot of stimulation, and when you're on a psychedelic and you take it at an event with music or lights, like that is your focus right there. But when you're with a facilitator and your focus, maybe you have an eye mask for half of it, and your focus is to go inward. And you know, someone I had, a colleague, a friend, a dear human being, you know, had once told me, Gina, get back in your canoe, right? Because like there's so much out here that you can get distracted by, or like the narrative that you want to tell yourself, but then there's the invitation to go back in, fall silent, don't distract yourself with all the things that we can be distracted by, and just see how your internal world is communicating to you on this medicine. There's a lot of messages and downloads in that way. So I'm going to share a little story of a participant who gave me permission to share this. And they have a history of working with psychedelics, taking psychedelics, particularly psilocybin mushrooms, in recreational settings with friends. And often they had taken too much and reported being really uncomfortable on mushrooms and even being scared of mushrooms. And so they decided they wanted to do an underground session, and they were supported and guided, and in that session they were working with some uncovered childhood trauma, and they started to see the ways in which they were living out of alignment in their life, to drugs, to relationships, to work. And through that experience in integration, long after with an integration coach, they were able to start to see what things needed to change in their life. And they no longer use mushrooms in recreational. They have seen that medicine is more meant to be intentional and ceremonial for them. And they were able to detect a sense of sacredness within the medicine. So being able to differentiate like what other things might be recreational and what might be preserved as more sacred. And they still take a journey about once a year to kind of support their ongoing work. Rachel, oh, come on back up.
This just in from Channel Now. Did you know that trees talk to each other through fungal networks? So I remember a couple years ago hearing, like I've known that, but there was this big breakthrough on this a few years ago. This is a truly incredible and astounding discovery. The main body of a fungus is compromised with mycelium and is underground. And fungi use their vast mycelium networks to connect to tree roots.
Thank you. Maljoy, have I called on you yet for a mushroom fun fact? Get over here. You've just all got to see this amazing outfit. Double time mushroom fun fact. You can come here. You gotta come over here.
Mushroom fun fact. Mushrooms grow on every continent except Antarctica. And they're an older life form than humans. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are the results? What are we seeing? The results we've been seeing with people vary, but the overarching results have shown to be effective in the treatment of various symptoms of trauma, including OCD, PTSD, anxiety, depression, nightmares, and simply expanding the mind to see outside the default mode network. The default mode network is a system of the brain that's activated when a person is not focused on what is happening around them. Sometimes the default mode network can be too rigid, which is contributing to compulsions and addictions and eating disorders. When consuming psilocybin, thousands of new connections begin to emerge in the brain. And as Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris said from Imperial College in London, it's currently doing psychedelic research, quote, "The brain operates with greater flexibility and interconnectedness under hallucinogens," end quote. Or as Michael Pollan said in his book, How to Change Your Mind, which is a really beautiful Netflix special as well, giving a nice overview of what's going on in the movement. Taking psychedelics can be like shaking up the snow globe of your mind, producing a soft layer of snow and an opportunity to start to create new pathways, new patterns of behavior. My colleague, Dr. Erica Zelfand, that I work with at InnerTrek, she really laid it out beautifully and gave me permission to share with you all on how some folks theorize why psilocybin and psychedelics have the healing potentials that it does. There's 7. Number 1, serotonin and 5-HT2A receptors supports plasticity and the ability to work through matters. You can see Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris or email me and I'll send you the bibliography. Number 2, neural crosstalk. When the parts of the brain are able to communicate with each other under psilocybin or psychedelics, there's a production of synesthesia, which is like when you can taste color, hallucinations, magical thinking, new ideas, new connections, innovations, insight, inventions, networks in the brain that are activated with this aren't necessarily staying after the drug wears off, but this is where integration is such a key point. When you are complete with your psychedelic experience, what you do with the content after matters or you'll lose it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that a little later. Number 3, default mode network and the entropic brain theory. Again, see Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris and Carl Fritz and more on this. But we're shaking up the snow globe and we're disrupting stereotyped patterns of thought, such as those associated with depression and addiction. We're also making space for ego disillusion, and when we let go of who we think we are and reconnect to the world around us, we start to connect to the community around us, and then we start just caring again for each other, kind of like mycelium network underground that supports the trees and the ecology of the world. That's what I imagine is happening here. Number 4, REBOOST, which is an acronym for Relaxed Beliefs under Psilocybin. 5, mystical experiences. Not everybody gets these, so we'll talk about that, but mystical experiences include unity, sacredness, egolessness, ineffability, which means I can't even explain the magic that just happened in this experience. Like, there's no words to describe what happened. Numinous, peace, joy, transcending time and space. What is time? Feels like objective truth about reality. And there was a study done at Johns Hopkins University with Dr. Roland Griffiths in anxiety and depression and life-threatening cancer. 60 to 80% of the participants showed significant reductions in depression and anxiety and increased quality of life and life meaning. Their benefits were sustained 6 to 7 months after. No flashbacks, no psychoses, no serious adverse symptoms. You can read more about this with Roland Griffiths at Johns Hopkins University and a lot of other amazing research with them. So it's important to note not everyone's going to have a mystical experience on psilocybin. Some people may have really difficult experiences, and it can bring up trauma that people may be integrating for months and years. And that's why it's always really highly recommended to get an integration coach or a therapist, somebody that's trained in understanding these medicines and altered states work, so that they can continue to like unwind it with you. Like, there are things that may not even make sense until years after your experience. You're like, oh, now I get it. But if you're not working with somebody, you're not continuing to like move that through. And the integration process is also helpful for you to start to think about, what new patterns am I needing to make in my life? Like, what messages did I get from that experience that need to start to mirror what my new life is going to look like? Maybe it's taking care of myself in better ways. Maybe it's drinking more water. Maybe it's finally reaching out to that friend that I cut off years ago. It's just really making you think more about healing things in your life that have been feeling in disconnection. My colleague says 25% of the work is preparation, 25% of the work is the psilocybin or the psychedelic experience, and 50% of the work is integration. So lucky. Did you already do your two? Who hasn't done a
I did
mushroom
not.
fun fact? Get over
Got
here.
a second fun fact.
Come on down.
Mushroom fun fact.
She memorizes hers.
So we all know that mushrooms like reproduce by spreading their spores. So the wind picks up the spores and spreads it around. When a mushroom is in an area where there's no wind, it's able to create its own wind to allow the spores to travel and reproduce. Fun fact.
Fun fact. Thank you. So psilocybin containing mushrooms can also support a deeper connection to yourself. Embodiment, in the moment experiences, play and fun. Taking psychedelics and psilocybin doesn't always have to be such hard work or serious. It can really open your heart to gratitude and love. I think a lot of you already know that. As Ram Dass said in celebrating the words, "Be here now." They really invite us to be in the now. And so does Channel Now invites you to be in the now moments. So if you're interested in becoming a facilitator or a participant or a manufacturer of psilocybin, please go to the website oregon.gov and you can find more information under Oregon Psilocybin Services. You can also find a list of the approved service centers that are currently open that you can go to, and people and manufacturers. It's all on there. Yeah, and so what we're gonna do, okay, so not yet, we're almost there. We're just gonna do a grounding, and after, we're gonna invite hands, and the girls will go and bring the paper to you. So just for a moment before we drop into that, if it's comfortable to close your eyes, I invite you to do so. If not, just finding a focal point in front of you does just the trick. And I just want you to breathe in through your nose and back out. We'll take 3 of those consciously together at your own pace. And I invite you to just observe what is happening inside sensationally in your body. Is there buzzing? Is there tingling? Soreness? Maybe certain parts of the body are more bright than the others. And just notice it. From a curious observer, without judging, you're just noticing what is. Okay, there's a little knot there. Okay, cool. Noting. Breathing. And then inviting your attention to notice your emotions right now. Again, from the perspective of a curious observer, no judgment, just noticing what's here. Irritability, joy, fear, contentment, just welcoming what is. Breathing. And then bringing attention to your beautiful brain and all its many thoughts, many of which can float down the river. But maybe there's a couple that are really sticking out to you right now. Just notice them. Again, non-attached, no judgment. And as you breathe in again, I want you to think about Oregon Country Fair and something joyful that comes up for you when you think about Oregon Country Fair and why you're here this weekend. Maybe there is a memory in the past, or something that happened last night, or maybe something you're looking forward to. And just really invite that excitement, that joy, that love to just fill your heart. Maybe it brings a smile to your face. And just breathe that in. And start to feel your sit bones underneath you. And as you softly open up your eyes, take a moment to just adjust. Maybe there's a colorful thing in front of you, or behind you. And then wiggle it out. Check it out. Welcome back. Thank you. So, that is the conclusion. If you have a question, raise your hand and my girls will come by and bring a paper. And while they're doing that, I wanted to share something. So I went to the Psychedelic Science Conference last week, 2 weeks, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. And I wanted to share something that happened because I think it's really important. So while in Denver, during the closing remarks of Rick Doblin with MAPS, various indigenous peoples came to the stage to speak and implored us to bring indigenous voices into the movement. And they wanted us to remember the sacredness of plant medicines and not to make the same mistakes of colonization and capitalization that we created with tobacco, cocaine, and opioids. So let us walk with awareness that people have been harmed. Medicines and sacred rituals have been appropriated and commodified. And while I look at things from an institutional platform, I'm open to viewing multiple experiences and perspectives on this very large topic. So it's important to hold space and remember that medicine has the potential to heal the self, but most importantly, the community around us. And if anyone today here has wisdom or knowledge to say to this point that hasn't been said, I welcome you to share. And then Annie, whenever you feel ready. I'm going to say a little quote too. Zoe Helene, our work is about a mindful relationship with the sacred plant or fungi. We work with, we journey with, we commune with, but we never use. And then Mary Casamano, who works at Johns Hopkins, psilocybin can offer a means to reconnect us to our true nature, our authentic self, and thereby help find meaning in our lives. So I think we only have about 5 minutes for questions. Yeah.
Let's go to logistics first. And this was asked a couple times. Do you have to live in the state of Oregon to use facilitation centers?
Yeah, no. So you can come out of state to get services. You don't have to be an Oregon resident to receive services at a psilocybin center. You do have to be a resident right now to be a facilitator, but that is going to be released in 2025. So if you're an out-of-state, you can get the education. You just won't be able to come to Oregon and provide the services until 2025 if you're out of the state. They're just trying to give the first opportunities to Oregon residents to do the work.
Gina, are there scholarships available for training for therapists?
Mm-hmm.
And can you say anything about who can take the training?
Yeah. So anyone with a high school education diploma can become a trained facilitator. You do not have to be a clinician. You don't have to have a master's or specialty in psychology. we, especially this year, I just did an orientation for our next cohort that starts in a couple weeks. And there were so many different folks from different walks and careers. It was really beautiful. And that was one of the big initiates of the measure for Tom and Cherie Eckert, is that they wanted people that weren't just clinicians to be able to provide space holding. And then there is I know of one scholarship, the Cherie Eckert Foundation Scholarship, offers funding to those wanting to take the facilitator training. It's about 140 hours, a 6-month program. Mine's InnerTrek that I work with, but there's also the Alma Institute, Fluence, SoundMind, IPI. There's many other ones out there. And I forgot what else I was going to say, so Annie.
And when's the next training, and how long are they?
Yeah. They're 6 months long, 140 hours, and they're about $9,000. And the next one for InnerTrek, I believe we closed, but that starts in 2 weeks. But I think there's other programs that are round the clock. Again, check with Psychedelics Today, SoundMind. These are all wonderful colleagues of mine. I love them, and I support Alma Institute. Is really beautiful. You know, like different people have different focuses on what their training programs are targeting, but everyone has to have the same amount of hours that are targeting certain subjects, so that the OHA can make sure that people are hitting the markers for what they need to be certified and facilitated.
Can you talk about insurance companies? Are there any of them covering this right now?
Yeah, so insurance companies understandably are a little bit more hesitant right now because it's still federally illegal. It's state legal, but it's federally illegal. And so just like cannabis, you kind of have to be mindful about that. Insurance companies, I think, are just going to kind of watch and see what happens before they might come in. The benefits of that is if you don't really want people to know that you're going in and do a psilocybin session, maybe you have some anonymity that you want to... my husband's like that. Anonymity. Then you get protected, because when you use insurance, you have to share your diagnoses, and you may not want them to know. So there's a perk of not having insurance involved at this time too. And probably one more. Yeah, one more.
Oh, this is kind of one of my favorites. Are flashbacks for real?
Yeah, they are for real. They are. Yeah.
Thank you, Gina.
Yeah, you're most welcome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to my channel now, ladies. Round of applause for these colorful beauties.
Thank you so much, Gina. Thank you for teaching us more about psilocybin. Is there a way that people can reach out to you should they have more questions?
You can find more information about any of the places that I work with. So my website, ginagratza.com. You'll find all the collaborations of the folks I work with, from ketamine to the VA research to InnerTrek. And then if you're interested in that particular program, it's InnerTrek. And then the Social and Neuroscience Psychotherapy Lab, the SNAP Lab as we call it, is the one doing the research with veterans. And if you want to reach out to me for a bibliography, ginagratza@gmail.com, and I will send that to you. Thank you all.
Big round of applause and gratitude.